You've been here before. Lying awake at 2 a.m., replaying a conversation in your head, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. Not just once, not twice, over and over again with the same person. Maybe different faces, but always the same feeling. That hollow, exhausted ache of wondering why the person who's supposed to love you is the same person making you feel the most alone. And the worst part? You stayed. You kept showing up. You kept trying, because somewhere underneath all that pain, you still believed it could be different. I know exactly why you stayed. Because you're not weak, you're not stupid, and you're not broken. You stayed because you loved somebody, and love doesn't come with a clean exit sign. It comes with hope, and hope, when it's pointed at the wrong person, will keep you in a burning building long after the smoke alarms go off. What I'm about to tell you is not a list of red flags you already know. It's not a therapy buzzword checklist. It's something deeper, something that touches the actual architecture of human connection and what happens when that architecture gets sabotaged brick by brick, sometimes by the person you trust most, and sometimes, and this is the part that stings, sometimes by you. Because here's what nobody tells you. The behaviors that destroy relationships don't always look like destruction. They don't always come loud. Sometimes they come quiet. Sometimes they come wrapped in love. Sometimes they look like the person just being honest with you, or just needing space, or just being tired. And you accept it because you love them, because you make excuses, because you've been taught that relationships take work and you're willing to work. But there's a difference between working on a relationship and slowly bleeding out inside one. Today, we're going to name exactly what those 10 behaviors are, not to give you someone to blame, but to give you something far more powerful than blame: clarity. Because you cannot fix what you cannot see, and you cannot protect yourself from what you haven't named. So stay with me, because by the time we're done, you're going to look at your relationships, past, present, and future, and you're going to see them differently, not with bitterness, with understanding. And understanding is where power lives. Let's go. The first behavior is constant criticism. And I don't mean the occasional complaint. I mean the slow, steady drip of correction that never stops. The partner who always has something to say about how you dressed, how you spoke, how you handled the situation, how you loaded the dishwasher, how you laughed too loud at dinner. A correction here, a comment there, a sigh that says more than words ever could. Here's what's brutal about this one. It doesn't feel like abuse at first. It feels like concern. It feels like your partner cares enough to want you to be better. And in the beginning, you might even appreciate it. You think, they're invested, they're paying attention, they want us to grow. But think about what happens to a plant when you only ever point out what's wrong with it. You don't water it, you don't give it light, you just stand over it every day and tell it it's not growing right. That plant does not thrive. It survives, barely, and then one day it just stops. That's what constant criticism does to a person. It doesn't correct them, it erodes them. It chips away at the part of them that felt confident and capable and worthy of love, and what's left is someone who's always slightly braced, always waiting for the next thing they did wrong, always walking on eggshells in the one place they should feel most free. John Gottman, who spent decades in a laboratory watching couples interact, called this one of the 4 horsemen of relationship destruction. Not criticism as in honest feedback. Criticism as in attacks on character. Not, I was heard when you forgot the reservation, but you're so irresponsible, you never think about anyone but yourself. You feel the difference. One names a behavior, the other executes a verdict on who you are as a human being.
And if you're in a relationship where you feel like you're always the defendant, always being found guilty of something, always trying to prove your worth, that's not love with rough edges. That's something else, and you deserve to know it. Now here's where it gets darker, because criticism on its own is bad enough, but the second behavior doesn't just wound you, it humiliates you. Contempt. This is the one that Gottman said was the single most reliable predictor of divorce. Not arguing, not even cheating. Contempt. And the reason it's so lethal is because contempt isn't just saying you did something wrong. Contempt is saying you are beneath me. It comes in the form of eye rolls, mockery, sarcasm that has a blade in it, name-calling, condescension so thick you can feel it in the air. It's the smirk when you share an idea. It's the way they talk about you to other people, not with pride, not even with neutrality, but with that particular brand of dismissiveness that lets everyone in the room know what they really think. And here's what makes contempt so insidious. It works. It does exactly what it's designed to do. Not consciously maybe, but functionally. It creates a hierarchy inside the relationship. It positions one person above and one person below. And a person below starts to believe it, starts to shrink, starts to think, well, maybe they're right. Maybe I am a little ridiculous. Maybe my feelings are a little too much. Maybe I should be grateful they put up with me at all. If you've ever thought that, I need you to hear this clearly. Gratitude for being tolerated is not love. That's conditioning. And you were not built to be tolerated. You were built to be cherished. Say this out loud right now, even if it feels uncomfortable. I am worthy of respect, not just in my best moments, but in all of them. Say it again if you need to, because the behaviors I'm about to show you next are going to require you to actually believe that. Because here's where it gets worse. What happens when you try to speak up about any of this? What happens when you say, that hurt me, or I need you to stop, or I felt humiliated when you did that? Some people hear that and they grow. They take responsibility, they repair. But other people who carry the next two behaviors, they do something entirely different. And what they do is the reason so many good people stay stuck in cycles they can't seem to break. Everything you've been told about how to fix a relationship that's hurting you, I'm about to show you why it doesn't work. You've been told to communicate, to open up, to be vulnerable, to say what you feel. And that advice is not wrong, but here's what they never told you. Vulnerability only works when the other person is capable of receiving it, and the third behavior destroys that possibility entirely. Defensiveness. Not the ordinary kind of defensiveness where someone gets a little prickly when they feel accused. I mean chronic, reflexive defensiveness that turns every conversation into a courtroom, where the moment you bring a concern, the other person immediately becomes the real victim, where your pain becomes their attack, where your need becomes their inconvenience, where somehow, no matter what you came to the conversation about, you end up apologizing by the end. Think about that for a second. You came in hurting. You left apologizing. How does that happen? It happens because defensiveness is a form of emotional reversal. It takes the focus off the actual issue and redirects the entire energy of the conversation toward protecting the ego of the person who caused the harm. It's not even always conscious. Some people have been doing it so long it's automatic. The moment they feel even a whisper of accountability, the walls go up, the counter-accusations come out, the victimhood narrative gets activated, and suddenly you're spending your emotional energy reassuring the person who hurt you. And here's the part that flips everything you think you know. You have probably been told that if you just communicate better, if you use softer language, if you come to them at the right time, if you frame it just right, the conversation will go differently. You've been told the problem is your delivery. That is a lie that keeps good people trying harder in relationships that will never change. Because when defensiveness is a pattern, not just a moment, but a pattern, no delivery is soft enough, no timing is right enough, no wording is careful enough. Because the issue isn't how you're bringing the concern. The issue is that the other person has decided, consciously or not, that they are not available for accountability. And you cannot negotiate your way into someone else's emotional availability. Here's the fourth behavior, and this one is going to sting a little. Because this one, more than almost any other, is the one that people don't recognize as a behavior at all. They think it's just a personality trait. They think it's just how they are. They've been told it's sensitivity or introversion or needing space. Stonewalling, emotional withdrawal, the silent treatment, the closed-off, checked-out, walls-up version of someone who has physically stayed in the relationship but emotionally left the building. And here's why this one cuts so deep. Because when someone stonewalls you, they don't just refuse to engage. They make you feel like you don't exist.
Like your words hit a wall and fall to the floor. Like you could be in the most pain of your life and the person sitting across from you is just scrolling their phone. Now, here's the contradiction. Here's where I flip the script completely. Because there are actually two very different things that look like stonewalling, and if you mix them up, you will either stay too long in something toxic or walk away from something that could have been healed. The first kind is weaponized. It's deliberate, it's punitive, it's designed to make you feel invisible until you comply, until you stop pushing, until you give up and come back to them on their terms. That kind is control, pure and simple. The second kind is physiological. Goffman found that when the heart rate exceeds about 100 beats per minute during conflict, the brain physically cannot process information well enough to have a productive conversation. Some people shut down not because they want to punish you, but because their nervous system has gone into full overwhelm and the shutdown is involuntary. The difference matters enormously. One is about power, the other is about capacity. And the way you tell the difference is whether after the space they come back, whether they take responsibility for the withdrawal, whether they actively work to get better at it, or whether the silence is always followed by you having to act like nothing happened, with no repair, no accountability, no acknowledgement that you were left alone in pain. Stop. Everything I just said, that's only the surface. Because beneath all four of these behaviors, there's a common thread, a root. And once you see it, you will understand not just these behaviors, but every relationship pattern you've ever been caught in. Repeat after me. I don't fix people who aren't trying to fix themselves. Say that again, slower this time, because that sentence is going to save you years. Now here's the one thing that changes everything, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The root underneath all of this is a failure of emotional honesty. Not just with each other, with themselves. The fifth behavior is the lack of honest and open communication. And I know that sounds basic, I know you've heard it 100 times, but here's what's actually happening beneath the surface of it that nobody talks about. Most people don't lie in relationships because they're malicious, they lie because they're afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of rejection, afraid that if they say what they actually feel, actually want, actually need, the other person will leave. So they smile when they're hurting. They say they're fine when they're falling apart. They agree to things they resent and then punish their partner quietly for the things they silently agreed to. And then one day, all that unspoken resentment reaches critical mass, and the relationship explodes over something that looks completely trivial from the outside. The dishes, the tone of a text message, being 5 minutes late. And everyone on the outside looks in and thinks, that seems like an overreaction. But it's not. It never is. What looks like an explosion over something small is always the detonation of everything that was never said. Honest communication isn't just nice to have. It's structural. It is the load-bearing wall of the relationship. You remove it, and the whole thing eventually collapses under its own weight. Often in ways that feel confusing to both people, because neither of them can point to the moment it broke. It broke in all the moments they chose silence over truth. The sixth behavior is holding grudges, and this one is sneaky, because it disguises itself as self-protection. You've been hurt. Of course you remember it. Of course you're wary. And protecting yourself from repeated harm is not just reasonable, it's necessary. But there's a line between healthy caution and carrying a ledger of every wrong ever done to you, every score never settled, every apology you felt was insufficient. And that line, when you cross it, stops protecting you. It starts imprisoning you. Here's what a grudge actually does, physiologically, psychologically. It keeps you in the past. It locks part of your attention and your energy into an event that has already ended, replaying it, rehearsing the arguments you should have made, feeling the injustice as fresh as the day it happened. And while you're back there, your present relationship, the version of it that exists right now, is starving for your attention. Forgiveness is not about the other person. Let me say that again because it's worth repeating. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a decision you make about your own mind. It is saying, I am no longer willing to pay the ongoing cost of carrying this. It doesn't mean what they did was okay. It doesn't mean you go back. It doesn't mean you forget. It means you stop letting the past have a vote in your present. The seventh behavior is the absence of empathy. And this one, I think, is the loneliest feeling in the world, because you can be in the same room as someone, in the same bed, in the same life, and still feel completely alone. If the person across from you cannot or will not try to understand what it feels like to be you, not agree with you, not fix it, just understand. Empathy is not complicated in theory. It's just the willingness to pause your own perspective long enough to actually receive someone else's. To say, I hear that you're hurting, and that matters to me, even if I don't fully understand it, even if I'd feel differently in your position. That small act of emotional recognition is so powerful. It doesn't solve problems, but it makes people feel less alone in them. And feeling less alone is often the difference between a person who stays open in a relationship and a person who slowly shuts down. When empathy disappears from a relationship, when your pain is consistently met with dismissal or logic or comparison or advice you didn't ask for, you stop bringing your pain. You stop being vulnerable. You stop trusting. And the relationship becomes a performance instead of a partnership. You show up, you go through the motions, but the real you is somewhere behind a wall, protecting itself from more disappointment. Now, the eighth behavior is selfishness. And I want to be careful here because selfishness gets used as an accusation too casually, too loosely. Needing time alone is not selfish. Having preferences is not selfish. Knowing what you want is not selfish. True relational selfishness is something more specific. It's the consistent, chronic pattern of making decisions without accounting for your partner's needs, of taking without giving back, of showing up for the relationship only when it's convenient or when you need something, of treating another person's love as a resource to draw from instead of a living thing that needs to be tended. Relationships are not 50-50. That framing actually causes a lot of damage, because if you're keeping score, you're already in trouble. A real partnership is when both people are willing to give 100 when the other person can only give 30, and then next month maybe it flips, because life is not evenly distributed. People go through seasons, they get sick, they fail, they fall, and the relationship either holds them or it doesn't. One-sided effort over a long stretch of time is not love being tested, it's a person being depleted, and depletion without repair becomes resentment, and resentment unaddressed becomes contempt. And contempt, as we already covered, is where relationships go to die. The ninth behavior is controlling behavior. And this one hides behind so many disguises. It hides behind love. I just worry about you. It hides behind logic. I just think this is the better decision. It hides behind protection. I'm just trying to keep you safe. But underneath all those masks is the same thing. The need to manage another person's choices, movements, relationships, thoughts, because your own anxiety, your own insecurity, your own fear of loss cannot be tolerated any other way. Control in a relationship looks like monitoring your partner's phone. It looks like needing to know where they are at all times. It looks like subtle discouragement of friendships that don't include you. It looks like financial control, social isolation, the slow, methodical narrowing of your partner's world until you are the only thing in it. And then, when they have nowhere else to go, calling that love. Here's the truth about control. It is always a fear response. Nobody who feels secure, who feels genuinely connected, who trusts their partner and trusts themselves, needs to control. Control is what fear looks like when it puts on the clothing of love. And the antidote to it isn't rules or boundaries imposed from outside. It's the hard, internal work of confronting the fear, the insecurity, the wound that makes being out of control feel unbearable. Until that work happens, control doesn't go away. It just finds new methods. And finally, the 10th behavior, the one that might be the most common, the most quiet, and in many ways the most heartbreaking of all. Taking your partner for granted, emotional neglect, the relationship that doesn't end with a dramatic explosion, but with a slow, barely perceptible fade, where one day you look across the table at the person you built a life with and realize you haven't really seen them in months, haven't asked them how they're doing and actually meant it, haven't touched them just to touch them, without it leading somewhere, without it being transactional. Haven't celebrated them, haven't told them what they mean to you, haven't chosen them actively, consciously, with intention in a very long time. Neglect doesn't require malice, it just requires distraction. It requires the slow drift that happens when life gets loud, when work takes over, when kids arrive, when comfort becomes complacency. And because nothing dramatic happens, because there's no argument you can point to, no incident you can name, it goes unaddressed until someone eventually stops trying to get your attention, and you don't even notice until they're gone. Every person in a relationship is making a silent, ongoing calculation. Am I still a priority? Does this person still choose me? Is what I'm giving here being received and valued? When that calculation comes back negative long enough, people don't always leave loudly. Sometimes they leave slowly, emotionally, while still sitting right next to you. And by the time the physical distance catches up, the emotional distance has been a fact for years. You came into this feeling the weight of something you couldn't quite name, a pattern you kept repeating, a pain you couldn't locate, a relationship that hurt in ways you didn't have language for. Now you have the language. Criticism that dismantles instead of builds, contempt that reduces a person to something beneath you, defensiveness that makes accountability impossible, stonewalling that turns silence into a weapon, dishonesty that protects the ego while starving the relationship, grudges that keep both people trapped in the past, absence of empathy that turns partners into strangers, selfishness that treats love like a resource, control that masquerades as care, and neglect that mistakes comfort for connection. These are the 10 ways a relationship dies, not usually all at once, usually one at a time, usually slowly, usually in ways that feel normal until they don't.
And here's what I want to leave you with. Whether you're recognizing these behaviors in someone else or sitting with the uncomfortable realization that you've shown some of them yourself, both things can be true, by the way. None of this is a life sentence. Patterns are not destiny. The fact that you're here, the fact that you stayed with this for 20 minutes, the fact that you wanted to understand this deeply, that tells me something about who you are. You are someone who takes love seriously. You are someone who wants to get this right. And people who want to get it right, who do the work of actually seeing themselves clearly, those are the people who build something real. Say this and mean it. I choose growth over comfort and truth over the story I've been telling myself. That's not a small thing. That's everything. If something in this reached you, if you felt that moment of recognition, that click of finally being understood, please don't keep this to yourself. Share it with someone who's been quietly struggling, someone who needs the words for something they've been feeling. Like this if it moved you, and stay close because there's more. One final thought. The Roman historian Tacitus wrote that the most dangerous kind of hatred is the quiet kind, the kind that grows in silence, in the gaps between what was said and what was meant. He wasn't just writing about empires, he was writing about us. He was writing about every relationship that ever died, not from one great wound, but from 1,000 small silences. You now know what those silences sound like. Don't go back to pretending you don't.